Thank you for joining me today. We're going to be looking at Isaiah 58 today for the thought of the day, and I would encourage you to go and read this. I've actually recorded this once and I was talking for about 20 minutes, so there's a lot to say, but actually I'm just going to rein it in a little bit, try and keep it short. But yeah, please do read this before or after, whatever you want to do. But my question to you is, how intentional do you feel that you're being with Jesus? Now, this is something that, well, the question that I asked myself, and I felt like I felt very challenged by that, because I felt actually I've not been massively intentional, and admittedly I have been seemingly going through the motions on like autopilot with my faith, and just sort of doing things because it becomes routine. And I just felt from reading this, like, yeah, challenged to change my ways, because actually from reading this, that's not what Jesus wants for me or for us. You know, he wants us to be intentional with him. It's a relationship. How do we deal with relationships with each other? It's like, it's not going to work if we're not intentional. And if we're just going through emotions and doing things on autopilot, it's going to start to break the relationship down. And so I think the first thing I wanted to say is just ask yourself, like, am I being intentional with Jesus, with my faith, with wanting to be aligned with his heart? And I think, half of this I feel is sort of talking about, well, they're talking about fasting, but it's talking about specific people who are doing something, fasting, but they're doing it for the wrong reasons, either to be seen, to be noticed, or they're doing it but they're also exploiting others, or they're arguing as their fasting ends. And I basically feel as though that is sort of setting us up to understand that is no way to live, because their heart isn't aligned with the Lord's. It's very much for themselves, and they're doing it for whatever reason but for themselves. And so that's the second part from verse 6, and it says, "Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen, to loose the chains of injustice and unite the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry, and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood?" And those two verses, I just feel, is very much the heart of the Father. He loves his children, and these things of injustice and oppression and hunger and poverty and so on, we know that those things break his heart, and so we should be living out of a place that breaks our heart too, because our heart is aligned. And so I just sort of caught myself reading this, like, how aligned is my heart with Jesus, with the Lord's heart? How aligned am I? And carrying on from that, I got to verse 11 and I was like, amazing. Actually, before that, verse 9, it sort of says, "If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness and your night will become like the noonday." And then verse 11, "The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land, and he will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. And it goes on. And I just think, like, that's the difference. Like, when we're doing something that is aligned with God's heart, but we're also being intentional, you know, we're not on autopilot, we're not just doing things for the sake of them, but we're doing them because we spent that time with Jesus, and we can't help but do things that matter to him, because they then matter to us. You know, this is the difference. This is what our lives will look like. This is what we will experience, you know, being guided by him, strengthened by him, satisfied. We will be like a well-watered garden. You know, that is the outcome of doing things that align with his heart. And I think it's sort of like the flip side of then how the chapter starts, where it's saying, you know, you're doing these things, but your heart is not aligned with God, and so nothing can really come of it. And so I think that's our hope, you know, verse 11, that the Lord will guide us always, that he'll satisfy us and strengthen us, and all of these things. Like, that is that's the outcome of being aligned with him and aligned with his heart. And as I was reading this, it reminded me of 1 Corinthians, I think it's 13, I have it here, where it says, you know, if I have such faith that I can move mountains but didn't love others, or, you know, if I have faith but I don't have love, then I am nothing, I have nothing. And I think that's what I thought as well, is like, love is the most important, you know. Love is the message. Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and so on, and love your neighbour as yourself. Love is the message, love is it. And so if our hearts are not aligned with the Father's heart,